Well, we've got, you all should have a couple of things, just an agenda page.
Got it.
And then we've got just a sinker intent to be lead agency determination.
Which we have on as a resolution tonight.
Great, great. And then the actual document in draft, just a draft form. So what we thought is, this being a work session tonight, we just go over the steps. I mean, the project status is item 1 on the agenda. And, well, I know you know the timeline, but it's good for us to just, actually, Steve, as you came in, you said to us, oh, you're in the final stretch. Yep. And actually, that's correct. Because the contract has us, it's surprising how time can move, you know?
I've noticed that.
Yeah, so that we may actually, in reality, have to perhaps go into the, you know, after Thanksgiving and into December.
And I think that's likely.
And that's
I think
likely,
we certainly
yeah.
don't want to get to the
Yeah.
point where the
Right.
public who's interested hasn't felt like they've had a chance
Yes.
to vet
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we're about to throw quite a bit at them all at once.
Yeah.
So
But I hope that there's nothing really new or radically different in the master plan update than what the public saw at the second, you know, the second workshop. So we sort of went over those things. We've actually made some changes to respond to the public,
Yeah, you
like
did.
one of the
You
things.
really did
Yeah,
a
we
great job
tried
of
to.
doing that.
So where we are is we've had both of the workshops, which are in orange on this timeline, and then we're here in October on the presentation to the village board. And what we're hoping you could do tonight, and this is dependent, we talked, Susan's been back and forth with Patty, as to whether we could set a public hearing. And I think Patty's favored date, if I get this correctly, seems to be November 21. She said you didn't
That's an
have.
off meeting, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Said that there's not a meeting scheduled, it'd be a special meeting.
which I think it needs to be. That works fine for me. Works fine for you guys?
Yes,
How
it's
about
perfect for
the rest
us.
of the board.
I'm fine.
Works with me.
Great.
That'd be great.
Yep.
So,
Colleen, is that?
and that gives us
Okay,
also.
so let's say, what time shall we do that?
I think 7 is probably a good time.
And,
Only because, you know,
right,
if it goes 2 hours, 3 people aren't here till late.
Right.
Mhm.
so.
Also, I
and-
think to the greatest degree possible, we should do something like this, consistent with when we normally hold our meetings, because that's sort of the rhythm of how we do things. And I think there are people who think we meet at 7 o'clock, and we don't want anybody to be
Okay.
thrown off by us meeting earlier or perhaps later.
Great.
And so, should we do that here or at Clinton Street?
This
It's
is
really,
a lot more comfortable.
I was gonna say, we got the AC
Yeah,
working
we
here?
may need now.
We might not need the AC, but
Yeah.
actually, this is a
Okay.
formal public hearing, so
Right.
this one probably should be,
Yeah.
Right, okay.
it's probably better to be here.
There it is, November 21, 7 PM, 80 Wheeler Avenue.
Great,
Done.
terrific. So we're all set for that, and what,
We're gonna have a resolution tonight, a special, we're gonna do the next meeting.
I plugged it in all by myself.
I think the way the resolution is written, it might leave a space
One
for,
of my-
there
It
there was an
does.
item on
Yeah,
there about
it
the
does,
public
yeah.
hearing, and we left it blank. You write that in.
so just write that in, and then the other thing to do, as you said, you have a resolution tonight, is just the intent to be lead agency. By the way, this is somewhat of a formality, but we want to be very careful on the state law complying with everything. You are the only ones who can be the lead agency. You are the only ones who can adopt the comprehensive plan under state law, so there's no one else who can be lead agency. But I think you want to declare your intent to be lead agency. You can leave 30 days. If no one objects, there's no one who can object. In 30 days, you automatically become lead agency under seeker. So once you're lead agency, we're presuming that after the public hearing, you would meet. You know, we would meet with you, and you may want changes, or you may want to make some revisions in the plan. So when you do it that evening, you can then make the determination. You will be lead agency by then, and then you can make what's called a determination of significance under seeker, which is your choices you have really is either a negative declaration, that is, there are no significant adverse environmental impacts to adopting your plan update, or a positive declaration. Yes, there are some.
Can I ask your opinion about that,
yeah.
just on that issue? Adopting the document is gonna have 0 environmental impacts.
Direct.
However, the implementation of what the document says could have significant
Right.
And they will have their own
environmental impacts.
secret.
How does that
Yes.
impact our secret determination now for the document?
Well,
How's
you-
that issue?
You raise a question in which the lawyers have debated this since seeker came into place. So about 30 years worth of debate. And that is, does a comprehensive plan of and by itself really have a direct impact?
Except a bunch of copies are gonna end up in the trash can
Well, I
probably
hope not.
afterward. No, one will be saved,
Bite
don't worry
your
about that. But other than that, there are no environmental impacts by the document itself, you know, the
Yeah.
Well,
adoption of
there's
the
none
Yeah.
by the document unless you, when every
It's the
zoning
implementation.
change you adopt, when you adopt zoning changes, they have their own, that creates
Correct,
a
and every
whole
site
other.
plan application
Right.
has one, and every zoning board application has one.
But I think where they come down on, and we're come down somewhat conservatively on it, I admit, that you do need to say to yourself, I think, that, you know, the plan has certain recommendations, let's say, for downtown in terms of zoning. We've been very careful, by the way, on it. There's no increase in FAR. That's what really controls densities. There's no increase in it. In fact, we made a decrease
Right.
in FAR in your A2 in the old village. So we'll probably, and I don't mind telegraphing this to you right now, we'll probably recommend to you that a negative declaration is appropriate in this case, because we're not increasing density. But there's an argument that you should look at it even if zoning is not before you. Because, actually, the good lawyer, I was going to say fancy lawyer, the the good lawyer I was thinking
Are
of.
they related, those two adjectives, do you think?
Yeah, has been at some of these meetings and will watch very carefully what you do in the master plan, because the first thing he'll do, I think, if he has a client wanting to still continue, is to say, well, wait a minute, your master plan said that this type of zoning that we're now asking for is appropriate and we're consistent with you. So you need to look at the impacts of down the line, because if you don't, you could be accused of what's called segmentation. You know, you pass something in the plan, you said it wasn't significant, but then someone comes in, a good
To
lawyer,
actually do it.
to do it, and you'll have a harder time saying no if it's in the plan. So I think you do need to look at it.
Well, the
Well, like
plan,
you said, we want applications
Yes.
to be consistent
To be
with the master
consistent,
plan.
yes.
So anything that, any developer that comes forward, if we adopt the master plan that we have now, we should expect
We should expect something.
those
yeah.
things to be consistent.
to be
So-
perfectly honest, not only expect, I mean,
You desire it.
Require.
we're hoping, I'm hoping
Yeah.
that some of our, what we're planning for, and ultimately if there's zoning changes to accompany this to implement, I'm hoping for those types of developments.
Yeah.
That's what we're
Yeah.
planning our village to be.
Well, I
So-
think the start of this compliance tonight is, in your regular meeting, is to just be able to make the intent to be lead agency, so you, in fact, start the process tonight.
So as, obviously, it goes its way out over the next some weeks, but how does that square with a potential strategy that says, obviously, any developer or property owner's individual project has a site plan review and a secret process of its own, but what if we said, I'm not saying we are saying this, but what if we said hypothetically that it would be our goal to have gotten through as many secret hoops as we felt reasonable to address scale, density, whatever. Let's say, for example, we identify that through the plan, we ultimately elect to approve 4 stories in the area of the post office. Is there a process we could go through now that would simplify the secret process for a future developer? And
There-
if so,
yeah.
are we compromising the protection of the village to do so, or are we actually increasing the chance of realizing what we envisioned?
I think the answer is yes, particularly, Peter, it's rarely done in Westchester or downstate or in Long Island, but Upstate tends to like to do on a master plan what's called a generic environmental impact statement. And that gives you the opportunity, if you want to use it that way, to go through the impacts of the recommendations, which we've partly done for you, but go through them. Do all the traffic analysis, all the shadows analysis in the generic, and then say in the generic that there's a part, it's usually part 6 of the generic EIS, that says, now, if someone coming in later does not exceed any of the thresholds we've set and we've studied, they no longer have to look at those issues. In other words, they're pre-cleared, if you will, on those issues. Now, it doesn't excuse them from looking at their own site. They still have to look at, is their site got any hazardous materials, that kind of site-specific look. But it clears them from looking at traffic, public school children, impacts, or any of that, because you've done a generic environmental
But
impact
it
statement.
puts the onus on us instead of the site-specific plan, whereas during that process, we would ask them to conduct the studies and to discuss the build-outs.
That's correct.
On their dime, it's not ours, so.
That, by the way, that
Yeah.
therein lies
Why you don't.
the key-
And
the
what is
key
that
difference.
upstate-downstate thing? Why has that?
It's just been more of a tradition, and you know what I think it has to do with is that, I shouldn't put it this way either, but upstate is basically development-wise much slower. There's not a lot happening, and so upstate is very anxious to sort of clear the way, clear the path for development, and so they're willing to go that extra route. Down here, you've got a market. You have a marketplace, and if you set up the right master plan, and then you say what your zoning is going to be, I think that what Mindy has said, we find true, and that is development communities willing to do the studies on their dime, rather than have those studies sort of pre-approved, if you will, on your dime. By the way, the generic EIS, to do it well, is not going to cost as much as the plan itself, but it could cost half of it, or it's a $40,000, $50,000 effort. You cannot do a generic in less than around 8 to 10 months and comply with the state law, the way the state law is set up. We have done this in the record so far that I know of that we've been involved with is New Rochelle, where they just absolutely, the mayor wanted, we were told, meet every single timeline of seeker and don't miss a single date, and we will, the whole council said the same thing. And it still took us 8 months to do the environmental impact statement for their downtown.
And that's a generic one?
It's a generic.
For this big development they have proposed?
It's for their downtown overlay zone. And, they met every single deadline. But most generics really take more like a year. And they're costly.
Just to spin that out, and I'm not inclined to think, based on what's been said so far, that it's the way to go, but how much benefit does the generic EIS in place provide? Let's just use an example. Let's say, as the plan suggests at the moment in draft, we might make available a development parcel at the south end of Memorial Plaza.
Right.
And put in place the zoning that we thought appropriate for that parcel, so that at the point at which we floated that parcel as a potential development site, its parameters would be clear in zoning. Somebody wants to buy it, they have to go through a whole secret review process, short form, long form, certainly long form, maybe EIS. How would that process be different if we had done a generic EIS, say, for this master plan?
Well, as Mindy mentioned, one is cost. The cost.
I get that, right.
Yeah, the generic is on you. The cost of their studies, obviously, is on them. So that's one issue. The other is that it will take you then, if you do a generic, another 8 months, let's say, 8 months to a year, to actually be in play, have the ability to adopt the plan and do the zoning. Until you comply with seeker, you can't actually act on adopting the plan or the
So if
zoning.
you've decided to do a generic, it's now or never.
That's right,
Isn't New
and,
Rochelle, the way they did their master plan, they're in conjunction with, they hired a major developer?
Yes,
that
a
is the
master
one
developer.
And that makes sense for them to do it.
Yeah.
They're pretty much paying for all of that.
and the master
But-
developer
But
contributed.
maybe, I don't know if this is where Peter is going with this, but maybe is there anything unrelated to SECR that would allow us to understand if, in fact, we implemented the zoning changes that you recommend and encourage the uses that we want to in the downtown, like a potential build-out of what does that mean in residential units, so what are those impacts on those residential units as far as traffic and things. And I know, it's usually like in the size of our village and the size of our potential, what we've targeted, it would be better to do a site-specific, secret analysis. However, like in the long term, when you're reading this, it sounds so exciting, but what if we got our dream and we got all this development? What does that mean to our housing units? Like, what are we adding here?
Yep.
And can we handle it? Can our
Right.
infrastructure
Right.
handle it?
Right. The key, if you do the negative declaration, is to cite, which we will cite, that we have not increased density compared to your existing zoning. So that we are not increasing
there
the
already,
FAR.
the
It's
potential.
there. So the potential build-out is there. The key, though, is we've made that build-out much easier to achieve with the recommendations of the plan, because we've, for instance, in residential downtown, we've kept the FAR at 2, but it also has a requirement of land area per unit. We've reduced that by half, so that it's more achievable to get the FAR of 2. We discussed this at one of our meetings.
Yeah.
So,
And that essentially is a method to, the existing zoning, perhaps partly by design, perhaps partly by accident, has overall guidelines that say you can do X, Y, and Z,
right.
and then a series of limiting factors that make it nearly impossible to do.
That's right.
X, Y,
And
and Z.
we've tried to remove those barriers. So
Right.
clearly, it makes it easier to achieve the density that you allow now. The other factor here is, and it's an unknown to me, and I guess it's an unknown to many people, is that I don't know where the economy is. I expect this fairly stable economy is what most of the economists are projecting, but we're hearing rumblings about, some banks becoming skittish in certain segments of the market. And so you need to weigh, you have it in your power to adopt the master plan this year. And as soon as that's done, you can follow up with zoning. To a developer going to a bank, that's bankable. This is
They'll lend against that.
they'll lend against these things. And you go to a bank on a generic EIS, and most of them in this area don't understand the generic, and you wouldn't be able to go to the bank with a generic EIS until 2018, whereas a developer could go to the bank
Yeah,
probably
I mean,
in January,
for
not,
all the
after
multiple
New
reasons,
Year's.
it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a generic EIS
Yeah, so
is
it's-
a
yeah.
realistic option. So.
Yeah.
And perhaps even separate from the
I mean,
scope.
obviously, from our purely business point of view, we'd be happy to do a generic, but I'm trying to advise from a, from a seeing
I
something
understand.
happen from a Pleasantville point of view.
Right.
This is your call, but it's, I go to the Bronxville mode all the time, and the mayor's the same, and she said, why would we ever do a generic EIS? We would never do anything that has significant adverse impact. And they're building a big
Well,
development right now.
that's just image, though. You don't want
Yeah.
to say to people, hey, yeah, we're doing something, and we've already said it's got a negative impact, but we're going to do it anyway. But
Yeah.
that's not correct
Yeah,
either. I
yeah,
mean, that's not
yeah.
I mean, the
accurate.
reason you would do a generic EIS is if you believe you found the right mix of conditions, and you would like to simplify the process down the road. I mean, obviously, from the standpoint of developers and property owners, the whole process in places like Westchester County is onerous.
It's onerous.
Far more
Right.
so than elsewhere in the country.
Yeah.
And it's a disincentive for lots of players. And one of the painful aspects of it, and just life, is that it's a substantial disincentive to the littler guys. And as a result, it leaves the playing field mostly to the bigger players,
Yeah.
which, you know, has its advantages, but is regrettable in other ways. Those are bigger problems than we can solve, so.
So,
I think the most important thing for our residents is that they see each project played out individually, so they
Yeah, I
understand.
agree
I
with
mean,
that.
it's
yeah,
just.
yeah, just play it out.
Right,
And
and
assess
I don't disagree with that.
independently.
I do agree with that, and I think that's the case. The downside to it is because of the torturous process you have to go through, a lot of stuff just never happens, so.
Yeah. So, I mean,
At
you'll.
least you're not the
yeah.
only ones who are using that process, I mean.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah,
No, I
it's the
get it.
same
Yeah.
process, and you know
Yeah,
what,
right.
it's, in most cases, it's the right process to go through,
Yeah.
so it's vetted with, amongst the public, and they can see
That's
all
right.
the, you know, they can see how it's been studied and
Yeah.
how this board and other boards make their decisions.
It's specific to
Yeah,
that project.
Specific to that
as
project.
opposed
Right.
to
Well, no
that.
project
Yeah.
comes to the same village,
Yeah,
because every time there's a project, the village changes.
yeah.
No, but I mean, really,
I
so you're not accounting
Simply.
Mhm.
for that.
All right, so,
Okay.
keep going, go
But,
ahead.
well, under next steps, then you set, so you'll, tonight, so you picked November 21, and then after the 21st, you're here, well, at the 21st, we would be able to come and synthesize this with slides, so if you want. I mean, we should be brief, because it's now that's why.
Public hearing.
Yeah, it's a public hearing, it should be here. It's a little bit more formal than a workshop.
Wouldn't we keep
And-
that public hearing open for,
You can, a lot of municipalities we work for will keep the hearing open for
the
written
next
comment
meeting,
yeah,
for
written?
10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I see a lot of. You're not,
Depends on how
I
many
think we
people
need,
come.
yeah,
Right.
we need to
Yeah.
not just open and close it. This isn't, you know, a changing the parking side of the street from one street
Yeah.
side to the other.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I think we need to
right, and
get
part
the
of that,
public that opportunity.
absolutely. And part of that is the feel you get that night. It could be, I've seen public hearings where, you know,
Yeah, you will get a feel that night.
it's quite frankly, on our New Rochelle overall plan, now that we did downtown, then an EIS, doing the overall plan, 4 people came.
Wow.
Really?
And the mayor was astounded. So the mayor simply closed the hearing, period. He just closed the hearing.
Yeah.
Now, I like to recommend closing it and leaving it open for comment for 10 days. The other extreme is 60 people sign up, and not everybody has a
Has a
full
chance.
chance to speak. I would extend the hearing to
Absolutely.
Right,
after
there,
Thanksgiving
depending
until
on
your
what
next
kind of-
meeting.
So,
you know.
I mean, the other piece of that is now we've got this document, which is what, 35 megabytes or something.
Mm-hmm.
It might be useful if we could offer people a sort of an executive summary, so to speak, that perhaps highlights the items that have changed.
Yeah, the change.
Concepts
Well,
and changes,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's the last chapter, is
Well-
exactly that.
Maybe we could
you
peel
know.
that out. and
Yeah.
By the way,
publish
we
that
could
separately.
peel that out, you could put it online, you can put the whole, well, it's ideal
Well,
to
we
put the
we
whole
will
thing
put
online.
the whole thing online,
Yeah.
it's just that it's a very big document.
Yeah.
I think sometimes though that leads to misunderstanding, though. You know, 'cause people read pieces of it and it's kind of, we've gotten into trouble in the past by summarizing things and, you know, maybe we just point them to the positions
Well,
of
and
what's
you
said,
know,
instead of
I-
restating
I-
it and not
right.
putting in the details, maybe point them to the sections.
You're right,
You know, and-
Colleen,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
you could see that how it's broken down.
Yeah,
Is very clear
It
that
is.
you have each one of
Right.
the areas, land use, zoning, economy, circulation, and then your priorities, and then recommendations and priorities for all of those areas. So yeah, it reads very well,
It does.
and it
So
would-
maybe the answer is, and I can do this and give it back to Patty, maybe we break up each section as its own PDF.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
leave it as a full PDF, you can
Chapter by
download the whole thing if
chapter.
you want
Chapter
it.
by
but-
chapter?
That's easy.
But,
Okay.
but then
Yeah.
people can
It is
pick and
definitely
choose.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And that
Good.
probably also gets most of the sections down to an emailable scale, right?
Yes.
Right.
Which would make it easy for people who
If they had a
want to share them
question.
with friends or whatever, just to zip it around.
Absolutely. And the other question is whether you want us to We could make a couple extra copies for Patty, put in the library, that kind of thing, if
Yep.
you want.
That's a good idea.
Most people are gonna read
Yeah,
it
that's a good
online,
idea.
but
That's a great idea.
some people might wanna,
Sure.
just
Yeah,
get the whole
I don't know,
thing. And
33 meg file, not everybody's gonna plow through
not
this whole
everybody's
thing.
gonna plow through
No
it,
way.
yeah. So it's,
It's these graphics that make it.
That's okay. I
It's
mean,
probably
it's
like
great.
one
It's
or
a
So
two
great
they're good,
document.
but they're good graphics.
Yeah.
How about
and
this?
they're
Susan?
necessary.
We
and
put
No,
a
I
couple of
think, yeah,
Easter
no.
eggs in here somewhere, and then we offer a prize to people who find them to encourage deep engagement with the document. What do you think?
Peter. Okay. Oh, by the way, I wanted to suggest to you that if we, actually, you've raised a
No,
good
there is
thing.
a typo on
There is.
something.
Yeah.
I wanted to.
But
yeah.
Frank told me not to bring them
Yeah, I
up
wanted to
tonight.
suggest to you that if you could give all the typos, English language,
Mine was just,
sentence
you're missing a
structure,
word, that's all.
missing a word, if they could all go maybe to Patty,
Yeah,
Um,
that she can assemble.
she could assemble those. However, what I was saying to Mindy in an email, if there are things that you've read in there that you find, hey, we didn't accurately reflect, we ought to discuss them tonight. I wanted to highlight for you two things that we heard that you might hear again. One I call, and no, man, Peter won't mind, because Peter and I discussed it, and you discussed it. I have a
Peter
lot of
Esch-
respect for
Eschweiler?
Peter Eschweiler?
I have a lot of
He
respect for him.
he came
He-
to me on something as well.
And
I'd
me
like to hear.
too.
So I called this the Peter Eschweiler issue that he mentioned to me. And he said, Frank, you know, of course, that they're not doing a full comprehensive plan. And I said, Peter, I do. But I said, I also know what state law says. And that is the comprehensive plan is what the village elected officials, the trustees, have determined it to be. In other words, and I go back far with Peter to the days of what was called 701 plans. This'll date me. There was a time in the United States in the 1960s and 1970s when the federal government funded master plans so communities could get. The old plans cost more than plans cost now. They would fund $100,000 in the 1960s to do a comprehensive plan. But the feds would outline for you what went into the plan. So my training, when I first started out as a young planner, was, oh, gee, I got to do A through Z. Well, state law does not say that. But Peter was brought up that, well, obviously, Peter was county planning commissioner reviewing all those plans. So the state law has been changed in the mid-90s by a man named George Raymond, actually. And it is permissive now. And it simply says it is up to the town board or the village board as to what you want in the master plan. And the reason they did that, or one of the reasons, is there's no more funding. So they didn't want to make, they didn't want, by the way, it's an unfunded mandate.
Maybe the only occasion when they appear to have cared about that.
So maybe, okay. So they did
So it's whatever
not-
we deem it to be.
It's whatever you deem it to be. And you outlined it for us. And you had the right to do that. And I think, therefore, in Peter's mind, he doesn't see the 12 paragraphs, the 12 sections
That
or
he's
chapters
used to ticking
that
off,
he's
right?
used to seeing.
No, well, let me tell you the comment he
Yeah.
made to me. I saw him the other night. We were talking just generally, but he said, you know, that is not a he used the word comprehensive. It's not a comprehensive master plan because it's not village wide. It's only a
Small
portion
scope.
of the village. And I said, no, you're right. It's only a portion of
This
the
is
village.
village-wide, though.
That's exactly right. I tried
It
to.
does not
I was
have
sitting
to
with
be
Joe when we had
village-wide
this-
for every single component. But our maps in here, our land use
Right. Your
zoning
discussion
map
about
is
the-
village-wide. We have some recommendations for the old village, you know, for the.
Right.
And for residential zones
For
as
residential
well.
zones. So we do have some recommendations here. But you don't have to have, it is what you, the trustees, determine it to be.
I thought we were, I mean, to be honest, I looked at this and I flipped through it, but I wasn't picking up on that particular issue. I wasn't thinking that way. I thought we were doing a limited master plan update for just a certain limited area of the village. And frankly, we weren't going to touch whatever our master plan says now with respect to the residential zones.
But
We-
the
we-
residential's mentioned because we're,
It's mentioned.
But that, we're not
Right.
touching the residential
Yeah.
zones, but we're
Right.
touching them as far as they are.
They're mentioned.
concerned
Yeah.
In the.
But you're
in
not
the old
recommending any
village
changes
and-
to our existing master plan as it pertains to the residential zones. Is that right?
Not really, except in this area, yeah.
Except
No,
the
You're right,
residential,
yeah.
right, I don't consider, this is
Yeah,
not a
no, this
residential
is not a
zone.
residential
There are
zone.
strictly residential zones.
Correct, correct.
We're not-
And,
yeah,
and let me
single
give you an
Frankly, it's the
example.
most of our
But they're
village
not-
board.
But he was mostly.
Let
he
me,
was-
let me give you an example of what we've done on New Rochelle, actually. We happen to be doing this now. And the mayor doesn't want any changes in the residential Waikiki. We're not making a single change. It would be at risk of, having an uproar.
Right.
So we do lots of plans. The next Bronxville plan, if we do it, and the mayor's already told me, Frank, the only thing you'll touch is the downtown area. We're not touching our residential zones. They love them just the way they are. So you don't have to have a comprehensive plan. You do not have to make a recommendation to change a residential area. But we do have a discussion, village-wide, all social economic
That's right.
populations.
Incorporated into your.
We've incorporated it in. So I understand Peter, but I wanted you to know you may hear him or
Well, we heard him
comment
loud and
similar.
clear the other
Yeah.
night. He was
And
not happy.
I can tell you that, you'll remember, when we were first here, we gave you 3 options for a plan. The first one kind of cost over $100,000, and that's the old 701 plan that's in Peter's mind.
Right.
That is a comprehensive plan that would look at all aspects of the village, and for instance, go into your police and fire and schools, all kinds of things. That's the old 701 plan, and that's what's in Peter's mind. Then we gave you a second option, which we said was in between, just looking at downtown and sort of a selected comprehensive plan update. Then we give you a third option, which is the lowest price to it. I think these are about 125, I'm trying to remember, 125,000 or so, 75,000,
Right.
the one you chose, and I think about 40 or 45,000 to just do the downtown update. And you chose to do the intermediate, 75,000. That is perfectly, you made a perfectly good, legitimate decision. It's totally within your authority, and the laws of New York on comprehensive plans now are directed so that you can have that flexibility. It leaves it to you, the trustees.
What we left off here, which we will, when we send you the PDFs, is there is an appendix that has demographics, which I know Peter was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
He
last
was concerned
time.
about that as well.
Yeah, and
Yes,
it's
we'll
been
have-
done, it just didn't make it into this.
We'll
It has
get
a
it in.
comparison of 2010 versus 2014, which
Yes,
is the most
yeah.
recent. So kind of a snapshot in time.
Absolutely.
And then you can compare across
He
time.
felt it should not be in an appendix, it should be somehow incorporated more into the body of the document.
We're happy to do, by the way,
Because-
that might be a comment you make to us after the hearing.
I don't know, frankly, really the difference.
Well, yeah.
If
What
there's an
difference?
appendix to a document, that's part of the document in my mind, but,
It
he was
is.
concerned, not concerned, but his issue was that he feels that we have been very progressive in our demographic outlook, and we should take some credit for that. We should say, hey, look where we've come since 1960,
By the way,
1970,
there's a
1980.
real
Look where we
good
are now demographically.
Yeah, I think that's a good
And
comment. and if
economically, the
you wanna
economic
move it-
diversity we have.
If you want to move it out of the appendix into a chapter, that's fine. I mean, we have the work done.
I don't know, Peter, that was Peter's
Yeah.
comment, so.
Yeah.
The appendix, though, is part of,
Right.
it functions as part of the plan, so.
I guess my thinking originally was that some of that, it's not purely statistical, some of it may involve some analysis and distillation, but some of these plans, it's hard actually to get to the nut of the vision.
The vision, right.
Because there's so much there.
By the
And-
way, that is so true. Usually when we're writing plans now, we're hoping to focus on what that vision is and the key elements of it. And the danger of a plan, already, and this is good.
This is
Tried
fairly
to
thin,
keep it
right?
short.
Isn't he good?
This is good, but it's 124 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
And fortunately, what makes it 124 pages is the graphics, though. I think it's readable.
That's
Very
great.
It's
readable.
very readable. And you know what?
Frank, I like
It is.
pictures.
Yeah.
It helps
So
me
do I.
It
understand
does
things.
speak to
I do
it does
too.
speak to the vision
Yeah.
by incorporating what you got from the public at those 2 forums, and I
Yeah.
think that you did that so well, because some of the things that, there was common threads through both of those, and you picked up on those. And that, those common threads were the vision.
Yeah.
It contributed
Yeah.
greatly to the overall vision, I should say. And I think it, when you read it from cover to cover, you get that feeling.
That's great.
And what really helped me too is that, when I was like, things that have been bothering me for all these years, I was like, oh, okay. I get it now, that's what we could do.
That's great.
But I do have some comments, but if we're to that point yet.
Yeah, no, I think
and
we
don't
should,
know
if there's
we'd like to have
some,
them.
if there's something of a policy nature that we should, that, an important thing we should either be aware of for the public hearing or change, so that we have an opportunity tonight. Second opportunity is after you hear everybody at the public hearing. By the way, I always find that no matter how many workshops we have, it's the public hearing that, there'll be somebody that comes out who never came and you hear something new.
Right.
So,
Thought of.
yeah, I think after the public hearing, we should get together with you at a meeting in December. At maybe do you know when your December meetings are?
Yes.
Yeah, the day after Christmas, you wanna come?
No,
The second and fourth, we do the second and fourth Mondays are our regular meetings.
The day after
So-
Christmas. I won't be here, so
And you
I,
was tell.
wait, so the
So-
Thinking that was
second
gonna be
Monday
canceled,
of
Peter.
December would be the 12th,
You're not fun, do you?
December 12th? December 12th.
Yes.
So if we could get on your agenda, Peter, for December 12th, it would allow us to debrief with you. Is that all right?
Just need to
On
make sure
when?
that Patty doesn't have anything else
Well, the
scheduled.
second
but
Monday of
she's-
December
she's the
December
holder
12th.
of those
is
Yeah.
December
times, but-
12th.
as long as the agenda's not.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
as long as she doesn't
Yeah.
have something scheduled, it would be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, well, we
So-
can do at the public hearings, make a dot
And
point
is that-
list of things we
Is
hear.
that better than? Yeah,
Or we
because
could
we've
do-
got 3 weeks between because of the way that falls, right?
Yeah, it would, by the way, we'd be happy to do it sooner.
I just wonder if that, letting
Yeah.
3 weeks pass
Yeah,
is
yeah.
too long to respond to that.
You want to, by the way, the week of the 28th is fine.
Yeah, can you do it
week
the
of the
last
5th.
week in November?
Yeah. we
What,
can
what,
do-
what if we proposed to add a work session on Monday, November 28?
That's fine with me, Susan, how you
Set.
doing? All right.
What day is Thanksgiving?
It is
Oh.
the 24th, the previous week. This would be the
So
Monday
it's
after
Monday.
Thanksgiving.
That'd be fine. In fact, I think it's better because it's fresh in everybody's
And
minds.
if we wait until December
Yeah.
12th, that's a long haul.
Yeah, it is.
So the public hearing the Monday before Thanksgiving, and then this work session that we're gonna do the Monday following.
Yeah, Monday following. And I
Okay.
think it's, that would be good because everything's fresh in your
All right,
mind.
so we'll have to talk to Patty about that, but
Yeah, yeah,
it seems like a good strategy to me.
okay.
So let's tentatively say that, 7 PM
That'd be
here,
great.
work session the 28th.
Because quite frankly, then that would allow us to get it back to you, and you'd be in a position then to make a determination of significance for seeker, and you'd be able to adopt the plan this year in December, So that would be, that would
Shoot
meet,
for the-
that would meet what you had wanted to do, what you had told us originally. That would work out. So just make sure, we have.
Get you the
we have-
EAF part 2.
Yeah, we'll get you the EAF, and I think that would be great.
Could we get, before you take our comments or questions, could you maybe give us a quick overview of the significant changes and the significant philosophy, I suppose,
Yes.
or of this
Yeah.
plan as it
I
pertains to
think so.
downtown?
Susan, you want
Yeah,
to,
sure.
you want to take that?
Well, and as you know, we focused intently on the downtown, but there were a couple areas in terms of land use and zoning outside of the downtown that we looked at that were, potentially subject to change or maybe needed to be changed. And the first, which we mentioned, was the Old Village. There were a few current zoning regulations that are probably not appropriate for the Old Village. The FAR was the same, or is the same as downtown. It doesn't have a land area requirement for residential units, even though downtown does. So things like that we're suggesting you tweak, so that the scale of development in the Old Village is, more compatible with what's there, not quite as intense as what you'd expect in the downtown. So that's the Old Village. There were a couple sites which are, very familiar to you, that are outside the downtown, that are, institutional uses. The Methodist Church, the Cottage School, which have been, we've seen developer interest in those. And it's been assisted living, which has been proposed for both of those in the past. So, we've looked at your assisted living regulations. They're a little bit outdated in some respects, and there's some tweaks that, we think you could make without, changing them significantly. But making some adjustments so that the kind of proposals that you might get in terms of assisted living are more consistent with what you want, and that potential developers of assisted living can use your zoning regulations rather than a PUD or creating a floating zone or something like that.
Could I interrupt here?
yeah.
This is where my question
Yeah.
was. Because I think that you addressed the type of a listed assisted living facility or this type of facility that likes to be built in a downtown or industrial area, and there are ones like that, and some of those include senior living along with them. But there are other facilities, like an application that we're going to have before us, that likes to build in a residential neighborhood, and we have no answer to them. And it concerns me that we know we have this potential out there, and we're not, yes, we can address it with, like you said, a PUD or, other type of floating zone or something like that, but there are two types of assisted living facilities, and we're addressing one by putting them into B and B1.
Right.
And great, but I find that, the one that's we are aware of and that is out there is not a BB1 development. It is a residential development, so right across from a PUD. So I'm uncomfortable because we're still back. I don't want to ignore that potential application because they've been before us. We haven't received an application, so it's not, on our, but we are going to receive an application. They have told us we're receiving an application. Dan Hollis is representing them.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just,
Well, we can,
Well-
one option is to expand
Well, so,
the recommendation on assisted.
I think the way we
pardon me
approached
for
it was
disappearing to
to,
find my pen that I just dropped.
Oh, okay.
you have regulations for assisted living now, I think in the RPO zone.
yeah, and
It's not single family. And
you
so,
address that
right, so,
perfectly, yeah.
I think the idea was that we tried to change those regulations so that they are more consistent with the type of senior living you're talking about, but stopping short of rezoning those areas. I think it would be up to the applicant probably to make a case.
Yes. but
Now the zoning regulations perhaps work better for them in that zone, and then they'd have to come forward.
And
with
I
a
would
zone
want them
change.
to make their case.
Right.
But I don't want it to be that,
It closes it.
it closes the
Okay.
door
I
for
agree
them.
with
Like, we need to recognize that there are different types of facilities, and that,
Well, the-
because I think
Alright,
it
so
would look
how-
even worse if it would be,
Intentionally
if
leave
we
it out,
intentionally leave it out or don't address it or don't embrace it and have them go through the due diligence of a zoning amendment or, a map
The-
change or whatever, that,
The other way to also encourage it, if you wanted to be more proactive, this is your call. A lot of places we're working in make assisted care facilities a special permit in residential zones. But they set the standards for the special permit. in the
And
plan.
what might those standards be?
Well, some of them have
Height.
to do with, some have to do with height, some have to do with access. But in the plan itself, we might not have to address all of them. We could set the stage to say that you could allow it in certain zones. I've seen some municipalities allow them in all residential zones, but they're by special permit.
So you can really look at it.
Sometimes it's a special permit to the village board because it represents a change in that zone.
So many,
But
I
it
like
sends
that
a-
idea.
it
Would
sends
that
a
then be
signal.
articulated in the plan, or would it just say, subject to a special permit, sort of to be determined later?
I mean, if
You
you
could have
wanted,
some bullets of the kinds of
Yeah.
things that you might
Yeah.
look at, and then drill down later with the zoning.
now this is a policy call. I call it a policy call because right now you've approached this more as a rezoning.
but
And
isn't that idea, the special permit idea, kind of the planning equivalent that's manifested in zoning as a floating zone?
It is, but with one except, Peter, if you make it, by the way, I'm not saying work out all the details in the plan. I'm
Right.
saying put in a couple of sentences that say, also because you want to encourage these facilities, you might consider,
right.
making it a
I don't think we
special
should use the
permit.
word, just to let you know, I don't think we should use the words encourage.
Okay.
I think we should, I would like to take a very balanced approach
Yeah.
to these, because it's kind of a new thing.
Right.
It's controversial, and I don't want either side of a
Right.
particular application to say that we favored one or the other. I don't want to be viewed that way. I think
Yeah.
it's important to say something like, we understand that there are these types of facilities in residential zones, and we could consider that as a special use permit at some point in the future.
We could say it
something
just
like
that way, there's different ways of allowing them. One is a special permit. Now, you then want to, if you choose to follow that recommendation with zoning, you then need to be careful a little bit about the criteria for granting the special permit. Because a special permit is slightly different than an overlay zone or a floating zone. And that is, technically with a special permit, if the applicant can show that they've met all the requirements of it, it must be granted.
They're entitled to it.
They're entitled to it. Now, with a floating zone, it is totally at your, discretion as to whether the zone should float here. Zoning is always at your discretion. A special permit, if it goes to you, has the greatest discretion. Because usually, no matter how you write a special permit, some of it, by the very nature, is somewhat vague, is somewhat, you can get into height, you can get into density, you can get into access, but because every site is different, there's going to be some language that says, and it fits in to the community and, so on. That
You
gives
could also, allow for buffers, larger
Yeah.
buffer zones, things like that, and.
So it depends. We could simply be more, offer more options for it and be, without saying we encourage it. If you want.
That seems reasonable.
Well,
I mean,
but
I-
because I think by not listing it sounds like we don't at all.
Right, and I
Yes,
think it
that's
should be
right.
Well,
incorporated, like you said.
there is
You do
language in there
address it.
now that says that they can be compatible with residential
Yes.
areas because they're quiet uses, they generally have lower traffic than
And there's
other.
low impact, you do,
higher
you
density.
address it very
So,
well
but
in
we
that
stopped
one paragraph,
short.
but you
Yeah,
stop
but you-
short there.
right.
Of
Yes.
saying specifically, so it's really your call.
Well, so, I mean, I think before we wanted to, I think all that's fine. I think the idea of changing it to a special permit use would require quite a bit more discussion. And a special permit could be granted by this board or potentially the planning commission,
It can
depending
be-
on
It
how
should, it
was
should be,
written.
a lot of
Uh,
special use permits in other municipalities, like, first floor living or first, things like that are the call of the, legislative board. And I think that's where it should lie, because we have that zoning, change power. And I think these things need to be, it's easier now that we have a master plan to point to, and it could be
Yeah.
consistent and we have a guide, but I think that it would be important to keep it with this board and in check,
The
No,
size,
that-
the size, and the size and shape, density, area requirements, and so on would all be just. Those are black and white. Those are
Yeah.
numbers that would be in the special use permit zoning requirements. And if they meet those, there may be some other slightly more vague things, but those things, if they meet them, they're met. There would be no discretion even to
I mean,
us.
I know, but they
to
would
deviate from
they
them.
would still be referred to planning, and, planning would still do all the site work and approvals, where that should lie with them too,
Site
so,
plan.
yeah.
Although if you made it a special permit use, you could identify it, which zones it's permitted to
Oh,
be used in.
that's right.
Right,
But,
We don't have to
but-
allow it
I
in
mean-
all residential zones.
Right.
I mean, just using the Methodist Church or the cottage school site as examples, both of those are single-family home zones. And so, if we're to have a special permit use, you'd obviously have to incorporate a single-family
Yes.
zone, because the two sites that have been reasonably discussed as a place for this couldn't possibly be eliminated from the special permit.
Right.
So what that would mean, which is a bit nervous-making, is that literally every neighborhood would, under that scenario, be a potential site for assisted living. And if a developer or a series of property owners were able to assemble enough parcels, you couldn't say no, subject to, obviously, whatever the guidelines were.
It-
You're
that's
gonna have
right.
that with overlay anyway, and.
Well, the
you know,
difference though with the zoning is you do not have to even accept
Right.
a zoning application for your
That's right.
consideration.
And a special permit
Special
application, you
permit
have to
application,
accept,
you've
as
gotta
long as it
accept.
meets the standards.
Yeah, now then you do have, and if you wanted to write the special permit, because we've done it both ways, you can write it sort of very black and white, but a lot of special permits are written about neighborhood quality, environmental impacts.
Right.
And so there's some discretion, and the greatest discretion is given by the courts to the elected officials. So that's why I like a special permit where it's something that is clearly different than I would not make there's a lot of things I wouldn't send to the trustees when they're purely design issues for the planning board.
Right.
Yeah, it's purely access.
Mhm.
Like a church
Okay.
parking lot to me it's access and
It's
how it
access,
works.
that's right, yeah.
But assisted care is of great, I think, concern to many residents. And when they learn about it and they understand it in a certain context, they may feel it's fine. But the special permit gives you the ability to look at all the criteria that you write into the zoning. It gives you discretion. But it
and
opens it up.
We have to accept it.
You have to accept
And
it.
so,
The
the reason-
zoning's not the case.
right, the reason for the special permit scenario would be to express more of a welcome mat
Yeah, it expresses more of a welcome.
to a potential developer.
But
subject
it
to
also allows us to put restrictions that are important to us in a special use permit, like buffers from the neighborhoods that they're in, like maybe it has to be on, like things that you would have in the overlay, you could put them in a special use permit.
Right.
It has to be
That's
on a
right.
county road.
Yeah.
It has to be,
Yeah.
you know, larger than 3 acres.
Oh, by
I
the
mean,
way,
you can't
you've
write
just
out this-
named one of those items.
Yeah.
What
Sometimes
part?
a special permit might require that you be on a collector or arterial road or a
Right.
county
Well, so,
road.
I mean,
Suddenly now you've eliminated
Right.
half the
Half of
village.
the-
Right.
half of the-
We have the
so-
template of
Yeah.
the floating zone that was
Yeah.
proposed during the benchmark project.
Yes, that's
And
right.
we haven't seen it yet, and now it's Shamberg Marwell representing Sunrise.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it's Dan Hollis.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
it
Shamrock
is.
Mall.
Yeah.
That's
That is,
Shamrock.
Right.
that was another.
Marwell,
There's 5
Horace,
names.
Satin Andres.
Hollis,
Andres,
yeah.
Hollis is,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
it's
it's the last name on the-
Yeah,
This is Hollis, you're right, and this
Rep-
is Marwell.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Representing Sunrise
Sunrise.
in this application, and
I know.
who knows what they'll decide to do. Certainly, the Cy Gruza, who had been representing Bedford Road Partners, had indicated that they were imagining they would come forward with a proposed zoning text amendment that was similar to what Steinmetz had proposed at the benchmark project. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we have that template,
Yeah.
which, among other things, much discussion was spent on what does it really mean? How narrowly written is it? Where else could this floating zone float?
Well,
So if you end up with a special permit that is embedded in your code that has somewhat of those characteristics,
it could end up being quite similar, except for the process. In other words, the
well,
special-
and arguably, I just, and it's not a discussion really for tonight, I'm not sure how much of an advantage it is. Each option presents some advantages and
Yeah,
disadvantages.
yeah. And they
So,
may
I mean,
wanna.
clearly, we wouldn't be, or at least speaking for myself, we wouldn't be in a circumstance where we said assisted living beyond a certain scale is a permitted use, subject to special permit in every residential zone in the village.
Right.
We would not say that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course not.
So-
But you don't have to
Right.
make the decision now on all the particulars. I mean, if it's something, if you wanted to go a little bit farther than what we have now,
Right.
you could say, you know, we've suggested expanding it into the B and B1 zones, that the village may consider in the future additional locations subject to, you know,
And
whatever.
that's
And that's all
fine.
you have to
That-
say.
And you
No-
may
no issue
also
there.
want to say that, you know, as well as the rezoning option, you
Right.
may want to consider the special permit option.
Right.
You'll study it.
Yeah.
Fine.
But now you have it
So
in
why
the
don't- why
plan.
don't you do
Right.
that? Because, I mean, we're gonna have to rewrite the zoning to incorporate the B and the B1.
Right.
Right.
And that will be the setting in which we would address the
You'll
question.
consider
whether
it,
we
you'll
wanna
go through all,
introduce-
you know, all the issues.
Everyone happy with that
Yeah.
as a
So
way
you-
forward?
Yeah, as long as it's addressed, I don't want to leave
Okay.
You don't
a
wanna leave it,
applicant,
yeah.
a potential
Yeah.
applicant
Right.
out there with no options.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, got it.
And nor does it bind you to do that either,
Right.
but it leaves the door open.
The
So
other, Susan will go through the others, but the one that sticks in my mind that I was very surprised that every single table, well, not that there were a lot of tables at the workshop, but
Yeah.
every table was sort of picked up something that we should have, actually, I have to blame myself for this, I just should have looked at, and it's our last, I think it's on the very last map here in the document, I think. I'm sorry, not the last map, but it's page 108, figure 34. Everyone picked up that at Memorial Plaza, we should have a wider road to keep the right turn going northbound and then to the east on Manville. So we have done that.
So some of those people
Right.
were arguing, I think what you have done addresses the issue without losing the big picture.
Without losing
There
the
certainly
big
are plenty of people who are arguing that they would like to keep that elbow that brings you out right by the railroad bridge adjacent to Vanderbilt. Didn't want to be sent back to the traffic light.
Right. That one we,
Right.
you know.
But-
But what we've made it here is, we've made actually Memorial Plaza, the road part of it.
I
coming
saw
north.
that. I liked that.
Yeah, we've made it wider so you can
Mhm.
clearly take a right turn.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
Does that widen the road though? I mean, that pinches Memorial Plaza a little bit, right? To make room for a dedicated right-hand turn?
Yes, what we're doing here, the comment was that, the comment we heard anyway, and it's sort of here on page, on this figure 34, is that we had made the park big enough, but that by doing so, we had narrowed the road so much
Right.
that there would be only one northbound lane of traffic, and that after a train gets in,
Yeah.
you get in your
Okay.
car, you're not even gonna be able to get out possibly of
That's
the
right.
exit. So everyone said, and all three tables said this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
yeah.
was a pretty.
And all three
commonly
tables, it
held
was
concern.
interesting to me that all three tables. picked
Listen,
this up.
for all of its, I hate the slip
What page
lane.
is it on?
It cuts off the monuments, and I just dislike the whole configuration. But for all that, it does serve a
It
purpose.
works.
People have to turn right
May not be one
and
way.
not hold up everybody else.
And there's
So,
a lot of
yeah.
Okay, what's
So
the-
that-
It's dangerous though.
That's what we've
very
done here.
dangerous.
We have
This would
taken
be
the slip
better.
lane out, we've
Yep.
kept the park,
Yep.
but we've widened the
It's
road
right before-
to have a right turn lane.
Section
I
six
remember
recommended
seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To 3 lanes.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yeah.
down there, it's in recommendations, okay.
So that we responded to, and that's something we
You
probably
responded
should-
to a lot.
Yeah.
I found that the lopsided comment, which I thought was a really interesting comment. that if
Three-story,
you-
two-story.
The three-story, four-story on Washington
Yeah,
Avenue.
you've kind of already got it.
And you kind of already have it already,
Yeah.
but making the corner right across from the Jacob Burns, like the liquor store, that, if you made that a four-story and it swooped down to the three, it would look kind of nice, like a
Right.
gateway onto Washington. That could be a beautiful enhancement
Yeah.
to Washington, without affecting the Grove Street residents.
Right.
God
Right,
forbid,
right.
we,
It frames it.
we do
It
that,
frames it.
right?
That's
Frames it.
right, yeah.
It would frame it,
Yeah.
it would be far enough, would it be far enough away to, in that, change that we're making as far as four-story, far enough away from a residential area?
Right.
I mean, that property backs up right to the corner of Tim Kelly, right?
Tim
So
Kelly.
this is,
Behind
No,
Tim
not
Kelly.
at that corner.
So this is
Yeah, Tim
technically-
Kelly's lot is deep. It comes all the
It
way
doesn't go all
behind.
the way to the liquor store. Right behind that is, I used to work in that building.
yeah.
I know that building very well.
And I know Tim Kelly's backyard.
So do I. I played more horseshoes there than you have. No, Tim Kelly's backyard
There's
does
the
not
acid
back
test.
up to the liquor store by any way,
The
shape, or
corner
form.
comes pretty
There's a
close to
parking-
that
there's a
parking lot
parking lot
behind,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Separate.
To the parking lot.
Yeah.
And that parking lot
It's
is
far
way
down.
back. It's not anywhere near the
All
liquor
right,
store.
so,
By the way, the other thing we put in, because we had simply forgotten it at the workshop, so I ended up just describing it. But on page 33, figure 33, Patty had sent us this drawing by an architect.
Michael Gallo.
So we put it in so people can see it. I think verbally what we heard was yes, it's a good idea, but now they're gonna see it. So when they see it, they may, there might be some responses at the public hearing that say, well, We're not sure.
Right, and the fire department.
The fire
Yeah,
department
I
would
mean,
definitely
fire
have to
department.
comment on that.
I was gonna ask you guys about that. I mean, the goals of having that there are to calm the traffic, I guess, right? And to avoid people doing the swoop that they do
The
now.
Yeah.
turnaround, yeah.
But the swoops would be almost impossible now because of the middle of the road improvements that you suggest. Can that circle, I don't know the rules around it, the distances that has to have, but I don't know this because they're not here, but my sense is that the fire department is gonna nix that.
By the
Can
way,
it move south?
they
Can
may.
Can it move a little bit? Can you
Yes,
bring it
yeah, oh
closer
yeah,
to the
this can
village?
move to where they want it.
Okay.
Well, I envision that though being not so much, the circle in the middle being so much of a curb
It's
as,
mountable.
as something that you could actually drive over if you had to.
It's a
Yes.
rotary.
By
Yeah.
the way, it's a totally mountable curb, you're right.
Right.
By the way, what I sent to Patty, and I don't, she probably didn't have a chance to share this with you, I don't
Maybe
know.
not.
I sent her photographs and everything, we can send them again. And actually, you can go see it. Where this is executed right now, of all places, and it's one tough place, Old Greenwich, Connecticut. And if you go to Old Greenwich, on their main street, they have one of these.
Sound Beach.
Yeah, Sound Beach. They have one of these turnarounds, but all it is cobblestones. The fire department, and by the way, in Old Greenwich, as you look at this building right here is the fire department. And the fire trucks can drive right over it. They can drive right over it. It's all cobblestone.
Right.
Yeah, I would,
Yeah.
where that is, and again, I'm not a fireman, but I think what they're gonna say is the difficulty there may be the turn. They can drive over it, that's fine.
They can drive right over it.
You do have a thing in the middle there, right, and that may be problematic for them.
Right, but
We'll
that's
have to
what
see
they
what
make
they
out
say.
of.
Yeah, that would-
That's
that
what
would
they-
be
See what they
That's why I
say.
wanted
By the
to
way,
see-
So
I've
the
learned
city
to,
of Carmel, in Indiana, we heard that mayor,
Yeah, yes.
this was a really terrible place, just, really affected by the economy and that it was desolate. And he went there, he's revitalized it. He gave a speech at the Westchester Municipal Official Association. He put in 99 rotaries as traffic calming,
George's
and
best friend.
and he swears by these rotaries that it
Yeah.
has worked
Yeah, I'm
with
sure. I
with
like it. I just think that place, they may
bicycles
just need to
and
move.
walking. I mean, he had a lot of land to work with, not like
Yeah.
our little
Yeah,
village,
you don't
but
have.
the rotary to him is like, I know a lot of municipalities
They put
that
them
are really into rotaries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
Massachusetts
that's-
seems to have a thing.
in. Massachusetts
Yeah,
does, yeah.
Are there other places where that would work in our town, or is this really the only?
Yeah, right.
RBA,
Right.
your consultants had made a suggestion for
7-Eleven.
one. That's
That's
right
the
out
place where I
here.
was gonna ask too.
Yeah.
Do we have room for it? there?
Yes, you do. There's a rotary could work there. And
Could
by
we-
the way, actually, we call them modern roundabouts, but,
Yeah.
just.
That was
but-
CDBG money. We
Was
just
it?
had that
Yeah.
all done.
Well, and the county said no to the roundabout.
Yeah,
They said
I was gonna
no.
say,
Well, unless we were gonna acquire a piece of that gas station property.
Yeah.
They're very hard to get approved here. They
Right.
wanted to do one up at Chappaqua Crossing,
Yeah.
right by that
Yeah.
light,
Yeah,
and the DEC and everybody's like, no, forget it. New York State DOT, no, you're not doing it.
Yeah,
You
there
know?
are problems you need land area.
Yeah.
And also, they're not cheap. We just designed one, again, for Bronxville, and I will predict that Bronxville will discuss it for 2 years and not do it, because
It's a lot of money.
the reason is it's a lot of money, and even though it's Bronxville, the first thing they're gonna say to themselves is, does the intersection work okay now?
Right.
The answer, yes. So they're gonna say, well, we're gonna spend the money
For something that already worked.
for something that already works. So it needs to be a real improvement. And by the way, the fire department may view this as something that's, again, not
They
necessary.
may not, I don't know, I
So,
just think
yeah.
that that's gonna be.
So
But this is new,
My
I just want you
question
to
is
know
really,
it's
can it float
just
down a little
in
bit?
there.
Can
So
it go-
back to figure 34 on page 108. A couple of people had looked at this over the weekend, and two comments I got, one of which was, and I'm not sure there's any way truly to address it, is that the lineup of cars waiting for people to get off the train is a consistent problem with people in the drive aisle waiting and blocking people's access to get in and out. That obviously takes space to have some place for people to do that, and I'm afraid we don't have it, but I just throw it out there. The other point that was made was a few years back, we put an additional drive out halfway down Memorial Plaza so that it was driven by the farm market so that you could use the south half of Memorial Plaza for parking, and they could exit in the middle.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And that is not only helpful for the farm market, but also helpful for this problem where you have people sort of jammed up by the train station exit, but people in the south end of the
think it's so
plaza can get out.
That's currently there now.
Right, it's
Okay,
currently
that's a
there
good
right
point.
now.
But it's
about-
not in this
it-
drawing.
It's
It's
just,
not in this drawing,
Wayne
but
should show it.
it's currently
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
north of the gazebo.
Okay.
Right.
You're relocating the gazebo. That obviously burns up a few parking spaces on the sides.
Yes,
Um,
but it
But worth it.
creates,
It's worth it.
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Right, and
probably.
it currently, it's, the interesting thing about it, which would obviously prevail, is it made the spots farther away from the train station more attractive to commuters because they could get out
They
faster.
could get out faster, right. Yeah, that's a,
Yeah.
that's a good,
That's a good point.
yeah,
One of the
absolutely.
plans we did see, and I don't think we have that plan up, was they had and it took away a lot of parking spaces, but it was a small rotary, back to rotaries, that you drove in to drop off and you just came around like by the gazebo, like you cut that out and you came in and it was like a little like square kind of
Yeah.
place, and
But it burned up quite a few
it
parking
burned
spaces.
up parking
Yeah.
spaces, but
Spaces,
it really did help
I
the,
think that was the Imbiano plan.
was it in Viano?
Yeah.
We have it there?
Yeah.
And that helps with drop-off, but not for the people waiting if the trains are late and all.
Right,
yeah.
We should talk to Metro North about getting us a little
Yeah.
alert system.
What will help a lot is to keep that halfway point.
Right.
So you can
Yeah.
exit.
So let me say another thing about 34. We're proposing here to push Cooley straight through, right?
Yes,
So would it help to have another of your blue clouds here on figure 34?
oh, yes.
Calling
Yeah,
that
that's
matter
why it's
out?
Yeah.
on 35.
Right.
But, because the figure, it's sort of covered up
Yeah,
by the bubbles.
that's right.
Yeah, but
Call it
I
out.
think it's good to call it out here too on 34. Just a blue, cool, extend.
Yeah, well,
straight
especially
through.
since 34 kind of puts all these pieces in the same
Yeah.
place.
Yep.
I have a good question. I don't know if this is addressed here or at another place, but were we, I'm assuming this is the case, but the flags would be relocated near where the gazebo is?
Yep,
Yeah,
the memorial would.
Right.
They'd all be relocated north to the little park.
I mean, where the gazebo is, and would we also bring the?
I mean, they might not have to be moved depending on how
Right,
this
they're
played
there
out.
now.
How they split up.
But then would we also move the other memorials we have
That are on
along
the
the line?
side?
I think not, because we didn't change anything there, do you think?
I
Well,
that
don't
little
know if we
ring
need
of-
to. I mean.
my own personal preference is that all of them should be in the same.
Together.
spot.
place.
But
Trouble
that's-
is, it just takes more space. I mean, we could look at that, certainly.
Those
Yeah.
little stones don't take.
Well, except you've got a World War I monument in the middle, and the whole arc of it at the moment probably takes, what is it? I would guess 15 feet wide? We could be
current
reconfigured,
one,
worth
yeah.
looking at.
It's not necessarily for this plan, but I
Right.
just think we should.
There's a
as
time
Yeah.
capsule under there from the
That's
tricentennial
right,
also.
there is
yes.
a time capsule under there.
Yeah,
You're
I don't
right.
know.
But if we could
Is there a
get all of
protocol for
that
moving a
together-
time
Even
capsule?
at
Do you
that
need an
end of the
undertaker, or-
plaza. They don't necessarily have to be all next to each other. One could be on one corner, one could be on the other.
Absolutely, but if
You
they
know?
were, they should be
Yeah, I agree.
geographically centered with
Yeah.
each other, I think.
They're kind of lost where they are.
I have a question
Yeah, I
about
hate that.
Cooley Street. Is there any consideration for not opening it up and using a portion of Cooley Street for additional space for parking, particularly in view of the fact that we were talking about there may someday be a two-deck structure there? Would that be, or is that something that you guys don't think is appropriate?
I just like being able to get out.
I know we were talking about how it would be a good idea to have
It's such a log
have a
jam in
through
there.
street so that people can
Yeah.
cut across, get through there, and I do agree with that. But I also think it's the street portion of Cooley Street next to where our existing parking lot is could be valuable space.
Although we're pretty much using it that way now. I mean, it's a bit polyglot, but, I mean, if we ended
No, but I
up with
mean,
a parking deck in
improve-
that area, you gotta
if-
get to it.
If the Rock and the Gray Building and get redeveloped, there's potential there for using a portion of that for I mean,
Okay.
we're burning up parking, and we need,
Yeah.
parking is something we haven't talked about yet tonight, but it's
Yeah.
gonna be a big part of whatever we do.
Yeah.
We have to figure
It
out
is.
where we're gonna put the cars and people for various
Well,
reasons,
I love
commuters
the-
and
There's-
visitors.
yeah,
we-
you have some good solutions about
Yeah.
the parking in lieu of,
Right.
because, someone representing a developer was sitting at our table, Frank, at one of the round tables, and he
Right.
did mention one of our lots as, you know, a payment in lieu of for what he wants to build
Right.
over here. And I think that's on page 111, right?
Right.
Right.
So that was also one of my comments, that you addressed this very well, the payment in lieu of, and not having, in order to address the development, and having maybe that, those, obviously those funds going towards maybe the deck over here, or,
Well,
Yeah.
or something.
another thing that's related to that, which I think, and I don't know if it's in here or not, it probably isn't, but that's because we hadn't talked about it before. Patty had two ideas and one she circulated to all of us, and one she was talking to me, just having a conversation. And one, of course, was this, some town or village in New Jersey contracted with
Summit.
Uber
Oh,
to
yeah.
pick up
I
a
said that,
portion.
Patty.
You said that,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
said that, to pick up a portion of the cost of commuters getting from their homes to the train station.
Right.
So people leave their cars at home. The other thing that Patty and I were talking about was, if we're talking about this looper and we're talking about it on a very limited basis right now, but if it's something that works well, maybe it's a free looper around the village in the morning and in the evening, getting people to and from home to the train station.
I don't know what you're
Neighborhoods.
talking about with the loop.
That was
It's a
Yeah.
little
A
shuttle.
little shuttle bus around the village that would be paid for by the cost of the village. We're talking about doing something soon with our senior van, and maybe Saturday
Just on a
mornings,
Saturday, though.
just to get people into the farmer's market, see how that works. But if that's something that into the future works well, people can leave their cars in their driveways and their garages rather than out here. Frees up a lot of space, frees up
Exactly.
spaces. We don't, you don't have to build a space that's already existing that nobody's using. It's great,
But
so.
what we're addressing in this update is about, for development, offering parking that is, changing the parking ratio as far as like a
Yeah.
studio.
And you're right.
And that kind of thing. And then also for other developments that are in the interiors, say you have a build out right here on Wheeler maybe, to relocate that parking somewhere else and do parking in lieu of.
No matter
So
what
it wasn't really addressing like the day-to-day, that's
But
in
that is part of
another.
parking, that's
No,
parking
no,
management.
no matter what we do to perhaps encourage people to leave their cars at home, if we get the kind of development that we're hoping for, there are gonna be more people and more cars in this village, and we do need to come up with additional parking solutions, we need to have additional parking space, and we need to pay for it somehow, and without a doubt, payment in lieu of providing parking so that we can use that money to build.
Exactly,
parking
that's
elsewhere
addressed
is-
in a
is-
whole
is-
chapter
is-
here, it's
yeah,
really very.
but
To
good.
go back
gotta
to your
happen.
like Cooley Street issue with, should it be, is if you put in like these decks and you have more parking, you need to get them out of the street, other than on the two ends too.
Yeah.
You're gonna have 3 times as many people parking, everybody coming onto that street. It would be great to have another outlet out of that street. I think.
That's what all the other plans are saying
That's
too,
right.
and our
Yeah.
sense was that, I mean, as I
So
mentioned
forget it.
earlier, we're sort of
Be a log
believers in
jam.
street connectivity.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yes.
giving choices. I think your fire department will like this.
Yes.
So
Oh, they'll
police
love it.
department, because right now you've got a super block, and
Yeah,
it's really hard to
absolutely.
get around it.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
So this-
Especially
this-
when there's anything
true.
spiking, right? Any kind of.
Yeah, and if you put a
Problem.
garage,
Like
here,
when a
which,
train comes in.
You know, we've been talking about the possibility of a garage here off of
Yeah.
Cooley Street. Then I think you need to service it so you
Yeah.
can get in and out.
It just seems to me if you used it for parking or part of the parking structure, you could still get in from Cooley, from the Bedford side and in and out from Cooley on the Manville side. You just couldn't go through. But maybe going through is more important. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think
It
the
just-
fire department, police department,
Prefer it?
wherever we can try to get a grid to work better on traffic, you have fewer cars circling around and doing larger circles
Right.
because you've got more choices.
Yep.
And the other thing is if something happened,
Yeah.
quite frankly, even for a short period of time, like tonight, we I don't know, we had pizza at Fire and what is it?
Wooden fire.
Wooden fire.
Ooh, I
Wooden
like
Fire.
that.
I always get it wrong, Wooden Fire. And I don't know what happened down at the football practice, but 2 ambulances had
Oh,
to get
no.
in. And at the other.
And the parking down there is terrible, and the
Yeah.
Wooden Fire is a great addition
Yeah.
in that location,
So
but they don't
I
have
said to myself,
sufficient
wow, there's
sufficient
no,
parking even for their
boy,
restaurant.
anything else happens, and then a tractor trailer decided to take a
To
left
turn
turn.
around, yeah.
And then, he just closed
Yeah,
down,
it
there's
doesn't
no other
take much.
north-south
It
road.
doesn't take much.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, this is like, you close down Memorial for whatever reason, you know, somebody took the
You
wrong.
can still cut through. It's
And
true.
now you got a choice. You got a
Yeah,
choice on
That,
doing.
that, the same connectivity was talked about for years with, you know, when you're on Wheeler to cross over to Washington, it's disjointed.
It's disjointed,
And,
yeah.
you know, people are crossing they're jaywalking,
that's a
really.
tough one, yeah.
And it's really tough. And when, some of the things you mentioned here were, when I was a member of the Business Revitalization Task Force, my buddy over there, and, we put together, you know, like what you have recommended in a portal, we put together manually to encourage development and with folders, and that you could take out certain things that you wanted to. It was great at the time, but it's so much easier to convey with your suggestions
Same
with
idea,
portal.
yeah.
It was a really good idea.
All right, so can I, you've gotten through kind of your agenda here, right?
Yeah,
Can I-
we're-
we have to move to
I
our regular
know
meeting.
it's 25
So can I
minutes, so-
suggest, could all of us commit to getting together what comments we have by this time next week?
Sure.
And then give them all back to Patty so that she can give them to
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
BFJ
that'd be
team
good, 'cause we
collectively.
should do one revision and then get it
Right.
up on
And get it up on the web. and
Right.
Get it up on the web,
copies to the
copies to the library.
But Meanwhile, we'll put this version up on the web and we'll break it
Yes.
up into chapters. We can do that, you don't have to worry
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that. So that we keep giving people access to the current version, so.
no, that's
I'll
great.
send- I'll send the appendix.
Great.
Yeah,
Throw
good.
that out there
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
It's-
But I did
Guide.
want to, and I think we've covered it, so when Peter gets up, the public hearing, you know the answer.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And he's a
Thank you.
great guy, so it's.
He certainly is. We're lucky to have him around. All right, thank you. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Good work.
You got the over 55.
Say goodbye.